Hello, I'd like to convene the Planning Commission meeting for June 17th. It's 6:01 p.m. So call to order. Roll call, please.
Youth Member Pedersen.
Present.
Commissioner Barnett.
Present.
Commissioner Latimer.
Here.
Commissioner Nugent.
Here.
Commissioner O'Gorman Jenkins.
Here.
And Chair Dahlbach.
Here.
Thank you. I would like to point out that Commissioner O'Neill and Willers and Wyrick are all absent from this evening's meeting.
Secondly, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the agenda, unless there are changes that anyone would like to make.
Move to approve.
A second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Barnett.
Aye.
Commissioner Latimer.
Yes.
Commissioner Nugent.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Gorman Jenkins.
Aye.
Chair Dahlbach.
Yes.
Youth Member Pedersen.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
All right. And now we'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. So if folks would stand.
I forgot to put up the flag. Sorry. Oh, yeah,
There it is.
we go, my little.
All right, are we ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, now in this portion of our show, our meeting, we will have public comments, and these are comments that are not associated with the agenda. We have a pretty good full house, so I'd like to not time folks, but unless it gets excessive, so we'll just start and see how it goes. And just please step up and state your name for the record.
Do I need to test this for sound? Everybody hear me?
You should be good. You'll just have to speak loudly.
Okay. Hi, everybody, commissioners.
I'll just state real quick that there's no PA system. So you're just gonna have to project and speak, and then what it's
can
doing
do
is
that.
it's catching your sound for the video.
I see.
That's what it's doing.
Just fine.
Yep.
Thank you. Let me know. Thank you. Happy to be here. My name is Lynn Marie DeVincent. I'm a city resident of Puebla Serena Mobile Home Park, and I'm here today as a representative of the Tri-Park Committee, which is the 3 mobile home parks within the city limits. Puebla Serena is one. That's a senior park, 127 homes. De Anza Moon Valley is an all-age family park, 225 homes. And Sonoma Oaks, located by Maxwell Village Shopping Center, which is a hybrid park of 50 market rate rentals owned by Thompson Properties, not under rent control, and 50 homes individually owned by homeowners under rent control. So that is over 1,000 residents, mostly working families, seniors, and veterans. And these 3 parks are under our city's rent stabilization ordinance, which is administered by the City of Sonoma and the Sonoma City Council. Thank you very much, City of Sonoma. And that rent stabilization ordinance was revised in a 6-year campaign from 2010 to 2016. And that's when the Tri-Park Committee was formed and activated. Today, we're bringing forward a new campaign. These 3 parks are also under another ordinance that's called the Closure and Conversion Ordinance, which applies to zoning and municipal code, which is why we are here before you, the Planning Commission. So I would like to acknowledge all of our neighbors who have come today to support us on this campaign. You can raise your hands or stand. And in particular, I would like to introduce 2 community leaders, not only in their parks, but in the broader community, Gary Hermes and Bonnie Joy Caslin. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Kyle. I'm the president of the Sonoma County Mobile Homeowners Association, and I'm a resident of Pueblo Sereno, one of the city's 3 mobile home parks. I'm here tonight to ask you to begin to update the city's mobile home closure and conversion ordinance. This isn't a new idea. It's already part of the housing element. Program 11. Original completion date was 2023. It was later changed to 2024. We're asking you to take that first step now. Ahead of this meeting, we submitted a fact sheet developed with our attorney, William Constantine. Will wrote the Sonoma Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance and was one of the primary drafters of AB 2782. That fact sheet outlines why this update is urgent. We're seeing park owners in Petaluma, Santa Rosa, and Cotati moving to close parks, displace residents, and eliminate affordable housing. There's no reason to think that Sonoma is immune. AB 2782 gave local governments the ability to adopt stronger protections that reflect local conditions. The fact sheet includes updates that would help Sonoma prevent speculative closures and protect its affordable housing stock. We're asking this commission to start the process of updating our ordinance so that it can serve as a real tool to protect our residents and our community. Thank you.
Esteemed commissioners and staff, my name is Ann Kolochitis, and I'm president of Sonoma Valley GSMOL, that's Golden State Manufactured Homeowners League. We're a 65-year-old all-volunteer statewide organization that helped shape the civil code governing mobile home parks and the relationship between owners and homeowners in the state of California. In 2020, I worked on AB 2782 through the legislative process. It was the first bill signed by Governor Newsom that year. Even during the height of the pandemic, lawmakers saw the urgent need to strengthen protections around park closures and conversions. The bill added important state-level safeguards, but it also made clear that the strongest protections must come from local government. That's why we're here today. Sonoma's current closure and conversion ordinance dates back to 2004. That's before the the mortgage crisis and everything that followed that. This is when parks were still owned by local mom and pop operators, but that's all changed. As highlighted in the 2019 report, private equity giants converge on manufactured homes, which is linked in the fact sheet that we gave you. Many parks are now owned by large investment firms focused on profits, not people. Since 2022, we've seen the harm these owners can cause. Harmony Communities, also known as Three Pillars, has brought chaos to Petaluma, Santa Rosa, and Cotati. In Petaluma alone, homeowners in 3 parks are experiencing overwhelming stress, threats of closure, multiple arbitrations, and legal fee demands nearing $500,000 for one arbitration. The city of Petaluma is doing its best to catch up, but it's been a scramble. When I see what's happening just down the road, I'm relieved it's not happening here yet. But it could happen here. It could already be underway, and we wouldn't know until it was too late. So that's why we're urging you to prioritize this update of Sonoma's ordinance to reflect the protections that are now available to you under 2782. This small step will offer peace of mind to hundreds of households, nearly 10% of the city's population, and help preserve one of the last truly affordable housing options in Sonoma. Thank you for your time and for standing with our mobile home communities.
Good evening, Planning Commission. I'm Caitlin Cornwall, and I'm representing Sonoma Valley Collaborative, which is a coalition of all types of interest groups across Sonoma Valley. We work on issues that are important to all those sectors, the biggest of which is housing affordability. And because of that, the members of Sonoma Valley Collaborative have been really very strongly in favor of protections for mobile homes from the very beginning, because it is one of the last and biggest sources of on subsidized affordable housing in Sonoma Valley. So the numbers are pretty big. It's about 2,400 people in the valley, and as you heard, about 1,000 in the city. A really substantial number of people who largely, if they lost those homes, would probably have to leave the valley and the city. And we don't want that. We've experienced enough loss as it is. So Sonoma Valley Collaborative is part of this team with Golden State Manufactured Home Owners League and the Sonoma County Mobile Homeowners Association to push for change in policy at the city level and then also at the county level. It's very easy to do. The option is there because of state law, and now is the time before something terrible happens here like has been happening elsewhere in Sonoma County. So we think the fact sheet that you got is full of options that are very effective and feasible and doable, and we urge you to adopt them. Thank you.
Anyone else? Comments not associated with the agenda? All right, well, I want to thank you for performing your civic exercise and coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the consent calendar. And I'll just ask if anyone has any changes. These are with respect to the Planning Commission minutes from May 15th, 2025.
Before anyone else goes, there were a couple changes that I had made prior. So the opening and closing of the meeting was done by Vice Chair Wyrick, not Chair Domo. So those two were made, and then there was a rewording of when Commissioner Barnett and Commissioner or Vice Chair Wyrick recused themselves for, I believe it was agenda item 4.1. Just those two.
Right. Any other comments or concerns? All right, then I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent calendar. So moved.
Second.
All right.
Okay, Commissioner Barnett,
Aye.
Commissioner Latimer,
Aye.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Gorman Jenkins.
Aye.
Chair Dombach,
Yes.
Youth Member Pedersen.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
All right.
Phone number on that.
A moment. All right, now we'll move on to the public hearing portion of our meeting tonight. Starting with the first item is item 4.1, which is a discussion, consideration, and possible action to approve a design review application for a proposed residential remodel to an existing residence that would result in changes to the front elevation of a home more than 45 years old located at 767 3rd Street East. So I'll hand it over to staff.
Thank you. Diane Levine, Associate Planner. And I first want to point out that I've made an error on the staff report with the applicant and site address location. The applicant is Lars Landberg, who is here today. If you have any questions for him, and obviously the site address is as it reads, which is 767 3rd Street East. So. Okay, so the project location, 767 3rd Street East, it is within the low density residential zoning and has that same general plan land use, and it is within the historic overlay and the central east planning area. It's got around a 9,000 square foot lot and has an existing 870 square foot single family residence with a detached 320 square foot garage to the rear. So the project description, it involves a remodel of an existing single-family residence. It doesn't expand the footprint at all. It's primarily to do with interior work. They are doing a replacement of the composite shingle roof with a standing seam metal roof that will increase the height. We'll talk a little bit more specific about that in some slides ahead. They'll do replacement of the windows and doors if approved, as well as the addition of a new open beam structure for the front entrance of the home and the replacement of that concrete entryway. There's also a replacement of the rear arbor structure, and they'll do some painting as well. I went ahead and just italicized the portions of the project that are actually triggering the design review before you, so you just knew the triggers for it. So here you can see the visibility from the public right of way is limited due to the existing non-conforming fence. However, the increase in the structure's height due to the changes in the roof, you will see an increase in height still well below the development standard. And you'll be able to see a portion of the arbor structure as well.
What's non-conforming about the fence?
Well, typically it's sort of an intent, right? So the intention that we have in the code is for when we say the 3 foot, 3.5 feet, I think in the front, there's wiggle room there because it doesn't, I think it is actually within the front setback is how it reads in the code. So they shouldn't have anything over 3.5 feet in the front setback.
Okay.
So here's the front elevation. The existing is up at the top, and it brings the existing height of 13 feet 5 inches to 14 feet 4 inches in overall height. And again, that's really the only design element that's subject to design review other than one small portion of a side elevation, which you can see here. You can see the top photo to the right. That would also be seen from the public right of way. And just to describe some of the other changes in the project, this is actually to the north side elevation, which is that side that you just saw in the previous picture. So again, you'll just see an increase in the height, just barely, and then that arbor structure, which actually creates a little intrigue. But other changes on this elevation include window and shade structure replacement, and then the replacement of those block windows to sliding doors. And this is the other side elevation, minimal window changes occurring here. And then here we have the rear elevation, which is a change in the shade structure here as well, and then a change out of some looks like ventilation windows to sliding doors. But again, everything's in the same footprint. I did include the findings for both design review and historic overlay, because again, this was supposed to go to design review. And staff is recommending approval of this project. We're happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Before we ask questions, does any commissioner have ex parte communications to divulge? All right, then I'll open it up for commissioner questions.
Does the non-conforming fence, now does it have to conform with this new application, or is it grandfathered in or grandparented in?
Yeah, I wouldn't label it as grandfathered in, but it's not something that we're seeking.
So nothing gets triggered?
No, not specifically.
Do you know if it's the intention of the
application
the
to have that?
We have the applicant here if you'd like to come up and answer any questions for us. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I'm Lars Langberg. I'm the architect for the project.
So is that fence going to remain?
No,
Okay.
the fence is, it wasn't put on any of our elevations because we wanted to show the building elevations. On the existing site plan, it's called out to be removed. So the plan is to leave it during construction to sort of make it a little more palatable for the neighbors during construction and then take it down. And yeah, that's the plan.
Thank you.
Any more questions for the representative of the applicant? All right, thank you. Okay, now I will open it up for any public comment on this project. I'm seeing shaking of heads, so I will close public comment and then finally open it up to commissioners for any comments.
Seems pretty straightforward to me, so I will move to approve the design review application for the residential remodel for the existing home located at 767 3rd Street East.
Second.
A second, all right, roll call.
Commissioner Barnett,
Aye.
Commissioner Latimer,
Aye.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Gorman Jenkins, and Chair Dahlbach.
Yes,
Youth Member Pedersen?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
congratulations. All right, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, 4.2, which is a discussion, consideration, and possible action to approve a design review application for a proposed residential window replacement on an existing residence that would result in changes to the window materials of the home listed as a contributor to the local historic district. This is located at 366 East Spain Street. So,
Great.
Bautista.
Well, good evening, Commissioners. I'm Associate Planner Jake Dunn, and this is the project for design review at 366 East Spain Street. The parcel is 10,404 square feet and located in the northeast planning area and historic overlay. It's zoned for residential low density with a general plan designation of light production. The project proposes replacing the existing windows. Due to its connection with the Samuel Sebastiani Residential Historic District, the window replacements will be aimed at maintaining the same style and design. The front-facing windows and first east-facing window will be wood casement, and then the remaining windows will use vinyl material. There's no alterations to the openings or trim, and they'll be maintained or replaced in kind. So here's the window schedule that shows a total of 14 windows that are going to be replaced, and a table that has the proposed materials and the sizing. And then this is a sample of the proposed wood casement windows that will be replaced in kind at the front and the first east front window, and then the proposed vinyl windows for the remainder. So the south elevation here shows those front windows that are going to be replaced in kind, and then the east side there with that first window being wood casement, and the remaining 3 windows will be vinyl. These are the rear images for the rear and side yard that will be all vinyl. So the property was reviewed for historical significance and requires design review due to its age and its connection to the Samuel Sebastiani Residential Historic District. The property was deemed significant under criteria 1 for its association with significant events, and criteria 2 for its association with Samuel Sebastiani himself. The residence retains a fair degree of physical integrity, so the style is going to be maintained, and then no other work is proposed on the house besides the window replacements. In accordance with design review findings, the project is compliant with the development code and doesn't propose changes to the size of the structure or uses on the property. It maintains the historic characteristics of the structure where feasible, and the project complies with the general plan without imposing rigid stylistic restrictions. The project proposes a consistent style and retains a portion of the original materials, and the proposal is compliant with the guidelines for local historic districts and isn't expected to negatively impact the historic character of surrounding properties.
Just one for the record. I think that's supposed to be historic design. It was just probably a pullover, right? Design review and historic. That's all.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Thanks.
And so, yeah, ultimately staff is recommending approval of the design review permit at 366 for the replacement of existing windows, including the action to approve categorical exemption pursuant to section 15301 and 15331 state CEQA guidelines. And the applicant is present and prepared to speak on behalf of the project, and staff will be available for questions.
All right, so I'll start with any ex parte conversations that we need to be aware of. No? Then I'll open it up for commissioners to either ask staff or the applicant. Any questions?
Sorry.
Commissioner Barnett? Sure.
I'm just curious as to what the decision-making process was to use vinyl on some windows and wood casement for another.
Primarily the cost. It's almost 3 times as much to do all wooden windows as to do vinyl.
And how much will the vinyl match the appearance of the wood?
It's very similar. We're working with North Bay Plywood out of Napa, and they do a lot of historical homes. And so they were actually very helpful in this process, as was Mr. Dunn, in choosing the material and the windows to use.
And so does vinyl last as long or longer than wood?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I know that it's because one of the biggest issues is the moisture, and we're dealing with black mold and difficulty operating the windows. And so I was just told that the vinyl windows were also a good option.
This is the same property where some large redwoods were removed not long ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago.
I think it was probably 10.
Well,
Time flies when you're, yeah.
And so it is. And did you own the property then? because that was quite a project.
Yes, it was.
And I was interested to see that they actually brought in a machine to plane and cut boards from the trunk of the large redwood while it was on site. I'd never seen that before. It was quite remarkable.
We had to remove them because they were dropping limbs and they were
No, I
considered
understood. I
very
heard
dangerous.
One of them was
Yeah.
just rotten to the core. So.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? All right, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you again, Mr. Dunn.
I will open it up for any comments from the public on this item. All right, seeing none, then I'll take it back to the commissioners and ask if you have any comments with regard to this project before we make a motion. 2 for 2. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move to approve the application and design review, and as I should have on the previous one, and it will accept the findings that have been included as part of the agenda item, and for the property located at something on
366.
on Spain Street.
366.
366 East Spain.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. So approved. Roll call.
Commissioner Barnett,
Aye.
Commissioner Latimer,
Aye.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Gorman Jenkins.
Aye.
And Chair Dunlap.
Yes.
Youth Member Pedersen.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Congratulations, and thank you for continuing to maintain these properties.
Thank you very much for all your help.
All right, moving right along. The next item, 4.3, is a discussion, consideration, and possible action to approve a wine tasting use permit for a wine tasting facility in an existing structure that would result in additional space for guests and modifications to the open space areas to accommodate outdoor seating at 596 First Street East. So I'll hand it over to.
Great. So yeah, this item is for wine tasting use permit, 596 First Street East. And the property is located in the downtown district within the historic overlay. The property is 7,500 square feet and zoned commercial. The project proposes a wine tasting facility called Patson Hall Tasting Room at a site which is previously used for wine tasting as well. The proposal includes an expansion of the use for additional guests to be seated inside, and then exterior modifications to the open space at the front yard that'll be accommodating exterior guests on the exterior. The exterior modifications will make it possible to accommodate for 4 tables with 16 seats. And then lastly, the applicant is proposing opening time at 10 a.m. instead of the standard opening time under wine tasting use permit ordinance is 11 a.m. And then also 9 a.m. for office use. So the site plan here shows the spaces for seating inside, and then their separation from that office space that's there in the center. The new hardscape for outdoor seating is shown on the northwest portion of the lot with accessible walkway to the parking lot there. So the proposal doesn't include any alterations to the existing structure, and therefore is not going to affect its compliance with the development code. And the open space requirements for commercially zoned properties is 10%, and the available open space of 23% is not affected in this case because the outdoor seating counts towards that open space. In accordance with the use permit findings, the proposal is consistent with the commercial zone and reinforces Sonoma's distinctive qualities while generating pedestrian activity. The proposal is compatible with the style and character of the neighboring properties and does not alter the existing structure. And then in accordance with the wine tasting use permit findings, the proposal is consistent with the previous use and then meets the general requirements. And the proposed use is also compatible with the future use for downtown district as commercial and mixed use. So one of the things the staff reviewed was the location of the wine tasting facility, and then we found that the plaza, it's not located within the Plaza Retail Overlay District, so it doesn't affect that total amount of facilities that are allowed there. One of the items that's for discussion is the proposed project's proximity to a neighboring church, which they are aware of the proposal, and the applicant has reached out to them to confirm that this won't conflict with their uses. But otherwise, the proposed use is consistent with the downtown district, and then the other uses surrounding it. There's a wine tasting facility, it's like a wine facility office, and then residential property. So staff recommends approval of the application for the wine tasting use permit at 569 First Street East, including approval of the categorical exemption pursuant to section 15301 and 15304 of state secret guidelines. And then the applicant is also present and would like to speak on behalf of the project, and staff will be available for questions.
Thank you.
Got a question for staff.
Just one moment. Any ex parte conversations with the applicant? Okay, I will open it up.
Jacob, just refresh for me what the border dimensions are of the area covered by the limitation of 25 wine tasting rooms.
So I guess it's kind of hard to, it's kind of like the first buildings located directly around the plaza. There is a couple more buildings located on the southwest side that go further to the west and further to the south. And then I think it also goes a little bit further to the east on the southeast side, a few buildings to the east.
Yeah, on East Napa.
Yeah.
Yes, and so, is there an actual border that's indicated on a map?
Yeah, inside the wine tasting use permit ordinance, there is a map. I wish I had it on here to show you. But yeah, there's a map that shows specifically which properties are included in that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for staff or the applicant?
I've got a question for the applicant.
Okay. Would you like to come on up? Sure. Thank you.
Should I take the lecture?
Yeah, that would be great.
Sorry to be so
No, I have a question too.
chatty. Hi.
Hi there.
You've got, as far as I'm concerned, one of the most significant trees in that location on the corner of your property.
Sure.
Is there any plan in your landscape plan for alteration or, God forbid, removal of that tree?
Nope, none whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
I had another question too.
Sure.
I can't remember from the narrative. With regard to the new seating, groundscaping that it runs along First Street East, will there be a wall, or is it just going to be open to First Street East?
We were envisioning open, but we were really going to take our cues from the California ABC of what they would require. And we would always defer to that or to any guidance we receive here as well.
I mean, it might be interesting to, even if it was a foliage.
Absolutely, and I think it could be attractive in its own right too. But I think just the principle of being available outside is we're interested in locking that down, and we would definitely take our cues from the relevant authorities.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner.
So
Nugent.
with the seating, the outdoor seating in the front of the building, and I understand that your tastings will be by appointment only.
Yes.
What's your plan to keep people from walking by and saying, "Oh, let's head on over here"? And I mean, how are you scheduling that?
Sure.
I mean, I can just see people walking in off the street.
Yeah, and that would be down to our individual training for our staff members to ensure that they're looking at the plan of the day as far as the bookings that came in via our online booking or via telephone as well.
I have one more question associated with that. Will there be signage that basically says by appointment only in the front?
Not as of yet. So we're planning on just falling in upon the Stone Edge sign, kind of word for word, which is operating under a by appointment only use permit right now, which to my recollection is just kind of the branding and then just tasting room there. So we were planning on just doing kind of a like for like, but everything is possible.
Okay. Any other questions? There's the Commissioner Barnett.
Yeah, we did bring up a map here.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so it is a few more buildings that are on that south side too.
It's the dotted.
Yeah, the
hash
dotted
line.
line will be the barrier or the boundary.
What's the heavy black line?
Downtown.
Yeah, that's downtown district. And then there's some lines you'll see on the first block face there, right around the square. And there's a limitation as to how many can be front facing on that block square, each block face.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
No.
All right, thank you. All right, now I'll open it up to the public. If anyone wants to make any comments with Greg, please come up to the podium and just state your name.
Oh, sure. David Simpson, 130 Batten Street. First of all, thank you everybody for volunteering your time, especially the youth Commissioner.
Yeah.
Congratulations. We do live immediately next door to this project on Patton Street, and I actually see this building out of our bedroom in my home office window, and I'm very familiar with the Paxson Hall Winery, and sadly, they were owned by a large corporation out of Seattle, which is also owned by a giant tobacco conglomerate, and now it's locally owned once again, and it showcases some of the best vineyards from Sonoma County as well. And today, and I wish I printed it out, I just looked at it on my phone, but there's a really interesting article in Wine Business Daily talking about the percentage of wineries in Napa that are owned by corporations, not by individuals. And Sonoma County looks really good in that article. So I think there's a lot to celebrate here by having James Hall come back home. I don't know these people socially, but I will say that August and his counterparts have come over and gone door to door and have literally just like made cold calls and have come up and made everybody in our neighborhood fairly warm and comfortable with their application. So my 2 cents worth is it seems like really good people and a great use, and I hope you guys unanimously approve this vote for them tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Any other comments from the public? All right. Any final comments by commissioners before we have a motion?
Well,
Commissioner Barnett?
just as a general topic, I'm supportive of this application, but I'm wondering if at some point we may need to revisit what the dimensions of the zone for numbers of wine tasting rooms in total is, because I suspect that there's the possibility that since it's a commercial use and acceptable in commercial zones, that we could end up with the conversion of more spaces into wine tasting applications that are outside of the existing plaza wine tasting zone, but adjacent to it. Literally could be right next to it. And so I'm just going to suggest that should be a topic of conversation. I'm not coming to any conclusion about what our final determination might be in a discussion like that, but I think it's worth having the discussion if the principle of the limitation was sensible in the first place, and we can examine whether or not that's still relevant. But if it was, in fact, had a justifiable and legitimate reason for existing in the first place, which is to say the limitation, then logic would dictate that the conversion of commercial district spaces to wine tasting uses adjacent to or within a few doors of the existing limit zone is something that's worth talking about. Other than that, I don't have any other comments, and I'll make the motion if nobody else wants to.
I just have one other comment. I mean, with regard to yours, I'm just curious if there's really been much of a change in like the number of wineries that have wine tasting rooms over the years since we put in that ordinance, that and whether it's just the economy is just policing itself with regard to that. So I don't know if that's something, if we do follow up on this conversation at some point, maybe just historically understand, has it really ebbed and flowed, or has it stayed fairly consistent with regard to needing even to expand it or not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good point. Any other comments? All right, so here 3 for 3.
Okay. I will make a motion to approve a wine tasting use permit for the space at 596 First Street East, and incorporating the findings that are presented as part of the agenda item.
Second.
All right, so move. You have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Latimer?
Aye.
Commissioner Nugent?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Gorman Jenkins?
Aye.
Chair Domba?
Yes.
Youth Member Pedersen?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
All right, congratulations. right. All right, now we'll move on to item 4.4, which is a discussion, consideration, and possible adoption of a resolution recommending City Council adopt an ordinance amending Sonoma Municipal Code by clarifying the responsibilities of the review authorities and modifying regulations pertaining to design review in order to further streamline city entitlement process. I hand it over to Director.
All right. So, Community Development Director Jennifer Gates, and before you is the ordinance, finally. Woo! Okay. So, in December of 2024, the Planning Commission meeting, the ad hoc for streamlining had presented recommendation on changes for discussion by the Planning Commission, and staff received direction at that time. On April 17th, we brought forward a discussion around some draft design review ordinance changes, and at that meeting, Planning Commission provided further clarifications requested, and this, what you have is what we move forward with. So some of the changes triggered other changes, and so it just took a little longer to get everything put together. So there's 2 exhibits with the ordinance itself. The first exhibit is really focused on just in regards to review authority and changing the wordage. So the first one is to modify Design Review and Historic Preservation Commission to just Historic Preservation Commission. So based on the talks that we've had and the changes to Design Review, it probably was best to take it out of the name, and because we would be modifying their purview. Then also to modify references of approval responsibility from actual listing of a commission, unless it really made sense to do so, and then instead place review authority. In some cases I did place planning commission because it just made sense to be specific, but in other cases it just made sense to let's just say review authority, because review authority could be staff. Also with that came to modify the demolition permit process, again reflecting the additional changes that we made in design review in the sense of what triggers design review, and so making those carry through to the demolition permit process and really looking at what we are going to review through that process for demolition. Again, structures that are not located in our historic overlay or listed or determined eligible for listing as a historic site or structure. And then also the detached accessory structures in the same vein, and then structures that the building official has already determined that are clear and immediate threat to public safety. And then lastly, removed design review and demolition from the Design Review and Historic Preservation Commission purview, as we discussed. Exhibit B is more about the changes to design review itself, that section of the code. That triggered a couple other sections to be amended. So that included to modify our multifamily objective standards to apply to all multifamily projects. The way that it was currently written, it said something to the effect of it being ministerial projects only. And so we wanted to open that up. So that's why the only change we made was just in regards to its applicability. We did add a definition because we realized throughout the code we say new construction, multifamily, and it really wasn't clear what that meant. We have a multifamily structure, but we don't have multifamily development. And multifamily structure just means multiple units in one building. And what we really are talking about is multifamily development itself. So we wanted to make sure we added a definition around that, and so that was included in this Exhibit B. And then the highlights again that we talked about before, Planning Commission is to review major design review. We removed the table that outlines what qualifies for different levels of design review and what's exempt, so that's gone. We are doing design review only for structures that are non-residential, and then residential structures that are located in the historic overlay or listed, etc. We will continue to require HREs until a citywide survey is complete. And then at that time, we'll revisit the triggers for historic resource evaluations. And then we created a new process for minor design review, and then also we increased what actually is exempt from design review. So again, our non-residential and our residential structures that are historic, we provided this list of these are the types of things that would be exempt. But we also wanted to make sure we clarified very specifically that if you aren't one of these things, you are exempt. So there wasn't any question.
Jennifer, quick question on the HRE. Is there a citywide survey planned? Is it in motion? What is the status of that?
So if the budget gets approved tomorrow, I have a good portion of funds already identified for this next fiscal year to complete
To do the survey, okay.
So part of to do the survey, I need a historic context statement, and so that's why it's a little bit more expensive than I had planned on. So I'm gonna do the proposals and see what comes back. I'm hoping that they don't have a lot of work, so they'll want to do work.
What does the last line on this mean? Increase in projects that are exempt from design review. That's the effect of the ordinance?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Jennifer, just back on the HRE for a second. So is that survey meant to replace what the owner of the Spain Street property just had to do themselves? So each individual owner will no longer be burdened with having to do an HRE? Is that the...
They won't have to do an HRE. So the idea is for them specifically. So let's say that they wanted to come back in and say, I want to do an addition to the home and I want to do modifications. We already know it's historic, so they wouldn't have the HRE, but they would need to still pay for a study around whether or not it is consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. So they don't have to pay for both, they just have to pay for the one now.
So we're going to pre-identify the ones that need HREs. Great.
Or that that don't necessarily need a full-on HRE, but they will need more work done. So what the historic resource evaluation does, it's not just the historic aspects, but also looks at the integrity and what the character defining features are. So it's a lot more than just what we're going to be doing. What we're going to do is basically drive around, and it's not me, but the consultant would drive around, they'll look at different periods of time and in the construction, and they're not going to be actually doing deep dive research on like who, but just kind of, all right, let's get an estimate of, or an idea of who's determined eligible as a historic resource. So that way we can quickly say, you know what, you don't need to do anything further, you're exempt from design review.
Without the deep dive research, you're going to be able to do that?
Yes. That's the goal.
Yeah, it would be great if we can.
And that way we protect our historic resources and then, get them listed hopefully. And then also, quickly be able to identify those that we don't need to go through this process.
Great.
And once we know that, also that citywide, we'll revisit the idea of the historic overlay was, I think, part of that conversation too we wanted to have moving forward. So staff's recommendation is to adopt the resolution, which recommends City Council adopt the ordinance amending the Sonoma Municipal Code, clarifying responsibilities of the review authorities and modifying regulations pertaining to design review in order to further streamline our city entitlement process, and then finding it exempt under our general rule and the CEQA guidelines. I do have the draft of the different exhibits that were provided to you. We can look at those if you want to, and if you have any questions. But that concludes staff's presentation as of right now.
So I'll open it up for questions from commissioners. Commissioner Barnett.
I know that this has been somewhat discussed in the past, but now that the existing design review commission is going to become a historical review commission, is there any special training or education that is going to take place for the existing members of that commission, and or when we recruit for that commission, are we going to require attendance at or participation in some kind of educational programs for those commissioners? Because now narrowed down to a very specific function.
So I already offer to them, so we're a member of California Preservation Foundation, so I offer to them, and I will offer to you guys as well, any webinar that is available, I get a certain number of available seats in those webinars. And so I do have members of those participating in different topics. They're not always relevant. I also have access to everything that's ever been filmed before. So yes, I do have training that I want to do with them and with you all around historic preservation. Their role is going to be focused on creating educational opportunities as well as identifying sites for listing, working and understanding this historic context statement drafts when they come up, and then also the list, because they are going to be the body that makes that recommendation to City Council for its adoption. So that is my intent. Right now, the idea would be that they'll go back to meeting quarterly, which is what's identified actually in the code currently, because they won't have to review actual projects on a regular basis. So yes, I'm all about training for everybody, including staff. Even the staff, I offer those webinars to. I do have training budget, and like you all for Planning Commission, Academy, I also have the ability to send to Preservation Conference.
Do you have any experience if you've had this kind of change in other cities that you've worked in? And maybe you haven't, but I guess what I'm curious about is how you think this is going to affect the recruitment for this commission. In other words, how many people are on it? Is it a 7-member commission? And has it been difficult to recruit for it currently? And will this change have do you think, a measurable effect on recruitment and the ability to attract people to it, since it's a narrower focus?
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, that's Climate Action is 7 members and they're full. PROS is 7 members, they're full. So we'll see when we refocus it and it being quarterly and not monthly. I think we have 4 members currently. So once we reposition it, we'll go back out for recruitment to fill it and kind of see where it goes from there. Our goal is still to do the 7 so that we have 5 local and 2 region. So we'll see how it goes, I think. And then the thing about this one too is even if as long as I have 4, I have a quorum to make recommendations. If I don't have 4, I can still hold a meeting because they're not going to be always having public hearings and making recommendations. So that'll be kind of nice because we haven't been able to meet.
And if someone wants to appeal a decision, who's the appeal body? Of the Planning Commission or the City Council?
City Council.
Jenna, did you say that they're not going to be meeting to review specific projects?
Correct.
So if the design review, if it falls within the purview of it needs a design review, where does that project get reviewed by the planning? Okay.
So in most cases, we saw a few today, but so the first one wouldn't come anymore. It's not historic. It wouldn't have come under the new ordinance. The second one would have because they requested vinyl. And so that does trigger a major design review. It's not exempt. Or I would push it probably to you all. And then the third one is a use permit. So let's say that use permit also wanted to do modifications to the exterior of that building. It's commercial. It's going to be a design review. So you would see both at the same time, which is what happens in a lot of cases, is that concurrent review. So if there's a use permit or something else and it also has design review, it'll come together at that same hearing.
And how much do you think this is going to increase the agenda items coming before this commission?
So you've been dealing with it for the last 3 months because I haven't had a design review meeting because I haven't been able to make quorum, and you'll have it again next month.
Yeah,
So
we seem to be having them every meeting.
yeah, so
So
it's
do you
just.
think that's the pattern gonna be? 2 or 3 at every meeting?
I think this
Well,
next.
not when it goes administrative though.
Not well, yeah, not when it goes administrative, and then a lot less. So
Maybe one.
yeah, I don't think most of our projects that we brought to you aren't historic, nor in the historic overlay. So they're not.
Gonna come.
Just
Come
simple
to you.
design.
Yeah, it'd be a lot less.
Well, I guess the first one would have still come to you because it's in the historic overlay. So technically, it would still come to you at this point until we change the idea of the historic overlay. Makes sense?
Yeah.
Do you want to see any aspect of the ordinance? Do you have any questions when you reviewed it?
Yeah. Anyone have any questions? No? I didn't. Nope.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. No, thank you. All right, so.
got a question.
Yeah, the fly does.
I know, it's fine.
To say hello.
So I'll ask once again for a motion.
Oh, come
4 for 4.
Look at you, Larry.
You're earning your keep, Larry.
It's intimidating to have to make the motion.
I will move that
just
we
have to read
adopt
Exactly.
a resolution recommending to the city council an ordinance amending the Sonoma Municipal Code, clarifying the responsibilities of the review authorities, and modifying regulations pertaining to design review.
Do I have a 2nd?
I'll second.
All right. So moved. Roll call, please.
People can do public comment.
Oh, I apologize, because there was no public. Would anyone in the audience like to make a comment? No? Okay. No. There's no public comment, so I'll close the public comment. Thank you for the reminder.
No problem. Okay, now we can vote. Commissioner Barnett,
Aye.
Commissioner Latimer,
Aye.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Gorman Jenkins.
Aye.
Chair Dombo,
Yes.
Youth Member Pedersen.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Right, nicely done. I'm sure you're happy. Chipping away at inconsistencies.
That was a beast.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that was a lot.
It was
Yeah,
very
a
well
beast.
done. There's still a lot to do for that's not under your purview.
Yeah.
That has to go with it too. I was like,
But, you know, thank you to the ad hoc.
you're welcome.
Is this going in front of the city council tomorrow?
July.
July.
I have to notice it.
Got it.
I didn't know if you would approve it.
Never assume.
I know, right? So it's
All right.
dangerous.
So moving on to items for discussion 5.1, an introductory study session for the draft sign ordinance, woohoo, to be reviewed and to gather comments.
Yeah, so this is for the sign ordinance study session. I believe there was a previous study session and that led to some to where this ordinance was written. So we're gonna kind of go over some of the things that have been written in the proposed ordinance, along with what is currently existing. And so some of the items we'll go over is the design review authority and administrative approvals by the director, off-premise signage, design standards, elimination, and then if we want to get into it, we can go into some of the signage sizing. Something I didn't include on here was the formation of an ad hoc, and that's up to you to decide whether you'd like to form that. So.
I'll just really quickly. So we met about this it was in your staff report, 2023, I think, a long time ago. And the ad hoc recommendation just never was executed by staff. And so if you want to do it, you could reform that. Part of the recommendation, though, is that we would not be taking signs anymore to design review. I did not remove that from the authority right now because that's still a discussion piece under signs. But that would be our recommendation, is to treat it in the similar manner of, okay, you're a new business in town, you're coming in for a use permit, let's get your sign, let's get everything right now, present the whole package and get approval right now, unless it's exempt. And so there's a lot of things that we're basically saying that Jacob will go over is, here's the rules. If it doesn't follow the rules, then you're asking for permission from a higher body than staff. Makes sense.
And we are the higher body.
You are the higher body.
Yeah, and so to touch on that, you'll see here in terms of the review authority. So the purpose of the new ordinance would be to create administrative sign permits, which would allow for ministerial review and then approval of certain permanent signs to ensure the compliance with the new provisions of the title. And this would apply to any person that wants to make a new sign, replace a sign, but it's not applicable to signs that are under a master sign program or any of those exempt signs. There's a list of them. And then permits are also not required for changing the face or copy of existing signage on the property. So like with the wine tasting use permit that we heard earlier, there is a sign on the site. They're going to be using that sign. All they'll be doing is changing the face. So which again will not require any type of.
So when you said changing the face, in other words, if there's a style of sign that already exists and simply the name of the business is changing, that would be a change
to the face
of it.
Yeah.
In some cases, color changes
Yeah.
as well. Which
So
would change the
fonts
face.
and colors would either be maintained or have to be reviewed.
Right. And so, yeah, also normal repair. And then, as Jennifer was saying, so there's no design review required unless it's required by community development director due to special circumstances, or if there's a request for an exception to the standards. We say exception, but not in the terms of exception permits, but more of like there's a request for something that's beyond what is currently allowed in the performance standards in this proposed ordinance. If they want to go beyond the height or beyond the area. And then the Planning Commission would be that review authority. So we'll get into something about.
Jake, so how often does the standards get looked at and or changed? And how does that happen? Does that happen here?
That's this, yeah. So we're, I don't know when the last time the sign ordinance was updated. But I'm sure it's probably been a bit. And so, and then developing the new one, I don't know how long this one's been in motion, but since 2023 at least, so.
2015.
2015 was the last time?
2015 was the last time the sign standards was updated.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that's due to have somebody look at it.
Well, I think the language is confusing too, so.
Yeah, I think, yeah, the standards it doesn't have as much of performance standards as this proposed sign ordinance does. So if you read through that one, you'll see there's multiple tables that list out exactly the heights, the locations, the area allowed, and then what zones. And so it's very specific. And so it gives you very clear standards for both the public and for staff to be able to review and say yes or no whether that sign's going to be allowed or not. And so one of the things that came up was off-premise signage. And so it's they're similar in the existing standards as well as the proposed standards. There's only one sentence that's different, but otherwise it's still that if the property or business has no street frontage, in which cases the signs can be located on the nearest property with street frontage, so that'd be like in front of them, or an adjacent property with written permission of that property owner. So one thing is that off-premise signage, so this proposed standard references a specific portion of code, and that specific portion of the proposed code is for portable and temporary signs. It's not for permanent. And so, and it doesn't say specifically in that standard or in that section off-premise signage, which we can add by if that's something that we feel is necessary, but this is to determine whether it's necessary to have off-premise signage. So if someone has a master sign plan, let's say a property has two businesses, one business is in the front, one business is in the back, but they're on the same parcel, they're gonna need a master sign program no matter what. Every property that has two or more businesses or uses operating on the same property will require a master sign program.
Will or currently does?
Does not currently, but will. And so all the properties that currently exist that have signage, those will be legal non-conforming once the approval of the sign ordinance passes. That'll kind of leave the ones that exist in place. If they already have that as a signage that's representing a business in the back, they'll be, covered under that. But for new businesses or new uses on a property, they'll need a master sign program. So this is, in a way, the master sign program makes it so that no matter what, both those businesses will be represented on that same property. In the case where I could see an off-premise signage being needed is when you have a flag lot. Let's say it's a driveway that goes behind a property and then there's a back property. We did see a project recently that got approved for a live-work facility, which was in a flag lot located behind a property. there's a chance that maybe they might want signage located at the front lot that might go on a separate property. That's one where I saw that I could see this taking effect. And then something to note is that billboards are going to be prohibited under the proposed ordinance, so off-premise signage won't be just used for advertising. This is going to be specifically for the sole purpose of representing the business that's operating in that location. And so this kind of just was brought up in sense of,
There's Bob.
Hello. If we feel that maybe that section needs to be updated so that we have a signage sizing standard specifically for off-premise signage, or if we feel that off-premise signage maybe it's limited in the cases that it might be needed. So I just wanted to bring that forward to you all.
Well, can I ask a question on that? I mean, what is the risk of not having some kind of dimensional standard for,
so the off-premise signs, it's for portable and temporary. So it's going to be like A-frames, or it's going to be, just really simple signage. So there's not really a negative impact. I mean, if we want it to just be focused on those types of signs, that can be something that they bring out and put out for the day, unless a business decides, hey, we want something permanent. That's the only time I could see some business coming in saying, we want something permanent at that front.
but then it'll fall under design standards.
But then we'd have to need, it wouldn't fall under these design standards because these are based on temporary and portable. So I would see them having to go to be reviewed further.
I want to touch on your master sign plan. So if a property owner has got 3 or 4 businesses, is this master sign program something that would apply to an overall sign that lists all businesses on the property? Or does it apply to the individual signs that each property displays, which have to then conform to some master plan?
It's both. So it gives an aggregate for all of them to utilize one sign, as well as having individual signs for their properties. So like a wall sign or window signs.
Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that, so an example of a master sign program that's currently in place and used would be the shopping center where Whole Foods is. Right? So that's an old one, but I still use it. I have it's a little 2-pager, and it tells me what color and what color the font has to be. It doesn't tell me what type of font, it just tells me colors and then what material. So it tells me these things. But I don't believe that it specifically states that you will have to say to that level of detail. So you can still allow for maybe a very specific thing, like this is where the sign is going to go on these different buildings and in this space, but maybe some flexibility in what the design actually is. So you don't have to be completely prescriptive.
Yeah.
It's up to the applicant and obviously working with
Well,
them.
for example, at Maxwell Village.
Thank you for the name.
Well, and Maxwell Village is an odd kind of character because it is developed in a uniform way in terms of the building design, but the signage is all chock-a-block all over the place. And while there may be a master plan for the individual signage, the individual businesses are doing their own thing. So when Rite Aid was there, they had their Rite Aid sign, and the Panda Express has got its illuminated Panda Express sign. Each of these businesses are pursuing their signage as if they're individual and there is no master plan.
And that one's a little different. That's not like, so Maxwell Village versus this one obviously is different. And I do know that Rite Aid.
Is Maxwell Village in the city limits?
Yes.
So that one was more difficult. There is, like you said, there is a standard, but some of them were not held to that standard, right? And so with the master sign programs, we have, this is where I like notebooks and paper. Getting our little notebook together of like, here's all the master sign programs, and we should make it easy, quick. And I think what happened with Maxwell is that people lost sight of the fact that there was one. Rite Aid got approved for a larger sign than what would have been allowed, from my understanding, history-wise. I know that when we did the new sign for Mokahates, that this came into discussion, but they've always been separate from that master sign program. So, yeah, I think if we start looking at when people are coming in and we say, all right, you know what? Whatever that Maxwell, whatever their property management company is, and I cannot think off the top of my head, but that group, we need you to come in and update your master sign program because this is a change, and so we need to come in and fix this at this point.
What I see is the difficulty in this is exactly what you're pinpointing, which is that the management companies or the development owners with multiple businesses may or may not be interested in enforcing a master sign program and may just as well like to leave it up to the individual businesses. And so what I hear you saying is the city's not going to give them a choice under this program. We're basically going to say to someone who has control over multiple businesses, you must have a master plan for your signage. And that's the deal.
Yeah. The other thing too to bring up is that with updated systems, now that we have online systems that are way better at tracking projects and the permits that have been approved, we'll have a way better way of being able to track those master sign programs. So if someone comes in asking about a sign or wanting to make changes to a sign, we'll bring up that property, and that property will show that there's a previously approved master sign program.
It's interesting because it's the same owner. I mean, it's the same property management company between the two, but they're very strict at this one.
Yeah, well, the question comes up for me is to just a matter of philosophy. Are we saying to a property owner, you have to have a master sign program and all the signs have to look alike? We're not saying that. So what would be a master sign program for a complex of shops in which the owner of the whole complex basically just is willing to accept the size limitations for each of the individual businesses and says to them, you can do whatever you want with their signs? Wouldn't that be a master sign program, or are we going to, in other words, is our request for a master sign program nothing more than a multiple business property owner specifying what the various tenants are allowed to do? Is that what a master sign program is?
It's primarily for limitation on aggregate area usage. So if you have six businesses on one property and all of them have massive signs, it's to prevent just the proliferation of huge signs from 6 businesses on one single property.
Okay, so the master sign program is basically a total area limitation program.
It makes it so they can work with each other to determine which business is likely to have larger sign area versus another business saying, yeah, we don't need as much. We're okay with this much wall.
Okay, so we're not going to require a uniform design or anything that would imply a uniformity of style.
So the design actually
didn't want to do it.
The design standards we do, and that's in here is discussion about design standards and coming up with design standards. So currently, in the proposed ordinance, there isn't design standards set forth. We have some in the existing, and I'll show them on the next slides.
Okay.
And then that'll kind of help. So that's here.
Yeah, I think that is important.
So you don't have to. I mean, that can be part of that ad hoc conversation because there are means by which there's certain things that we can't touch. We ran into this, like the branding aspects and just hitting, just hard stops when dealing with when Wells Fargo came in and did the whole rebranding and working with them and what colors. They have 3 colors to choose from. And so we were just kind of alternating, what colors are going to look best on this building. They came in later, right? But we had already identified, this is how much you have. This is what your size of your signs are. A master program could be just to that effect of like what Jacob was saying is, this is how much each one of you gets, this is where that sign is gonna go, and create that uniformity so that when they come, businesses actually come in, all we have to do is open this and go, this is what your rules are, and this is what you get, instead of going to a sign code and saying, what kind of sign are you doing again? And what's this? Because there are in most cases sharing a monument sign, sharing a pole sign or some other type of freestanding sign they're sharing, and so the management company designers are already going to identify this is how much each one's going to get, and we're just kind of like locking that in of saying, all right, we've already designed this. So now we're going to use that and just tell you this is what you get.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that, I think that looks attractive when we actually define, there's some continuity there, and then they can still have their logo action on that smaller sign versus a slightly bigger sign and a smaller sign. It gets kind of jumbled.
Have you ever been to the city of Windsor? And that redevelopment. So that I look at the signs, don't look at the buildings. So I was just looking at the signs the other day, and when I was there, and I was just like, oh, okay. They obviously have a master sign program. It was just.
I mean, I see that in other municipalities too, where again, there's a height restriction, and the signs all generally have to look to try to minimize the noise of the signs.
But that works with that type of development where everything looks the same.
Yeah.
And so there's little things. I would never do a master sign program for the plaza or for downtown, right? Like that's not every building.
Or for the rest of Sonoma. I mean,
all the
you're talking
buildings
about
are
like
unique.
PUDs and new developments that occur in Arizona or something that end up having that standard. But I don't think
So I think
an eclectic city like Sonoma would want to have
not every
a
building.
program that looks exactly the same.
No, I understand, but do we want, like we were talking about, huge signs or small signs? I mean,
Which is, I think, what we were talking about. The total square footage of, or that makes sense to me completely.
And this is specifically for properties with more than one.
absolutely.
And I mean, I haven't looked into it, but how many in Sonoma are there?
There's a lot.
Yeah, there's the ones that do exist. I don't know how many of them have programs. I mean,
They kind of have programs like Sonoma Courts. She's got her freestanding sign, and then I think she's got a wall. There's definitely a wall at Paseo. There's a wall one, but when you walk in, they show all the businesses right there.
And there's some down Broadway that have monument signs.
yeah. So master sign program will trigger whenever there's multiple someone coming into a property and has multiple businesses. That'll trigger that master sign program.
And, and that's for just two or more.
I didn't see this on your slide, but Jennifer and I talked about it earlier, is whether this question of specifically for the plaza and the signage for the numbers, and if there's something that, are we all okay with the variety of what we're seeing, or is there something that we want to have just on the plaza in terms of not size, but type?
6-foot high numbers for the fire department.
Yeah, the size has to remain, but some are more attractive than
I'll
others.
have to take more of a look. I've seen what you're talking about, but I'm gonna have to take more of a look.
And in a case, for example, and you may not be aware of the property, but there's a business in town called Wilson's Locksmith. Now, it's a tiny little strip center. I think it has 3 businesses in it. And I can't recall specifically how they deal with their signage. It just maybe things painted on windows. It just doesn't matter. My question is, how is that grandparented in, if at all? When does the requirement for a master plan get triggered?
So I'd have to look. I'm pretty sure it's just whenever a new sign on a multi-tenant parcel is
Okay,
proposed.
so in a little building that has 3 businesses on it, if one of those 3 businesses turns over and wants to have a new sign, does that then trigger the master sign requirement?
master sign program, yeah, but I can pull up, especially when we go over it again, when we get into it further. I can pull up the ordinance now if you'd like me to for the master sign program, if you want to take a look at that. But in terms of what they may be required, it's just going to be that determination of what's existing, what's legal non-conforming as it is, and then what are the limitations for this new business coming into that with a new sign.
And we can write it specifically to how you guys want to trigger it.
Right.
So,
That too.
Well, I mean, let's think through that situation, that there's an existing sign, a new business comes in. If we were to trigger them to now become conforming, that's an expense for them.
right, and that's where I'm going with like a whole master sign program is an expense versus just their sign. And so that's the question is, are we diverting from a thing that's already being done, a style or whatnot, and completely something new? Does it not conform with our standards? And then how does that affect these other businesses? So I think there's a way in which we can write it to grandfather these in and then say, okay, now it's triggered.
Could it be triggered with the sale of a building, a multi-unit, maybe that?
So I still wanted to trigger by tenant change, because then that's when you actually change a sign, not necessarily an ownership that doesn't change actual signs and require installation of new signs.
And are we generally, I'm struggling with the philosophy here a little bit of what the goal is of this whole thing, right? So are we just trying to limit the amount of square footage of signage that's exposed to the street corners? Are we trying to, throughout the whole city, control colors, style, sizing? What's the overarching goal here? Again, I don't see this as being, a new PUD in the middle of the desert somewhere that everything wants to look exactly the same. It's pretty eclectic at the moment. What new here do you want to accomplish that you haven't accomplished to date?
I think that's primarily based on your discussion of whether you think that design standards should be set forth, and then as well as for the master sign program, it's that proliferation of signage on a single lot with multiple businesses. That the master sign programs, at least my experience in the previous jurisdiction, is that is one of the primary purposes of the master sign program is to prevent there from being, let's say, 6 freestanding signs on a single lot, or if it's a lot that has three businesses, three freestanding signs in a row representing each one of those businesses on one single lot, and all that aggregate signage not being calculated or considered. So a lot of times the master sign program just makes it so that they're working together to combine, for the style of the property, or the making it look better.
And you're going to have to come up with when that trigger is going to occur for the master sign.
Right.
Yeah. But to answer your question, Stephen, because my involvement with the city goes back far enough to the original sign.
You were on the HRE that I read today.
The intent of it was basically aesthetic. It was, does Sonoma have a character? If so, what is it? And there was an attempt to define what contributes or detracts from that character. So for example, the use of backlit illuminated signs has basically been very difficult for people to get, if at all, because the decision was, when the sign ordinance was put together, that it tends to become garish, and there's a competition between businesses as to who can have the most attention-getting sign. I mean, you wouldn't want a sign that's blinking and so on and so forth. And so the attempt of the ordinance was to basically say, we have a certain, I don't want to use the word style, but we have a certain character which is important to, and we want to do our best to create regulations that help preserve that character. This discussion came up, for example, when the decision was made about chain stores on the plaza, fast food stores on the plaza would be the example everybody thought of. You know, what would be the change in the character of the plaza if there was a Burger King on one block with the standard Burger King look and a McDonald's on another block with the standard McDonald's look? And is that what we want Sonoma to be? And that was the genesis, that philosophy of there is something about this place we can identify, and do we want to, having identified it, then impose some kind of standard so it doesn't get lost. So there's a bit of, unquestionably, this is a subjective.
Sure. It might need, my gut reaction to that would be, I agree with all of that, but hopefully the standards are relatively general as opposed to.
And they have been.
They have been
Anti-illumination. They've been so much size. We've never imposed a color standard or a font standard, or all of our standards have been very objective in terms of total size and the style of construction of the sign itself. And so what a multi-property, which is where we were in this discussion, where a multi-business property comes into the discussion is, of course, the owners of those properties have the right to impose whatever standards they want on their tenants. And as long as they conform to the general sign standards that the city imposes, they could tighten it up and change it to whatever it is they would require of their tenants, the city's standards notwithstanding. So that means a place like the Sonoma Marketplace can say to its tenants, no, this is the font you have to use, this is the color you have to use, and this is the material you have to use, and that's it.
And they do.
And they do. And the city's never gone that far, and I wouldn't want us to, but.
And then we know that that's what's required, and so then we can approve it automatically. It doesn't have to go to planning commission or design review in this case, because I know what they want, and we've already approved the size limitations, everything. I know exactly how it's going to go installed. I know everything about it.
So from the old to the new, what we're proposing here, what's the key issue here? Is it primarily the multiple tenant
What it would apply
sign?
to.
Okay.
What it applied to.
Scrambling up the learning curve.
You're fine. Let's go and talk about design standards and the fact that we are proposing right now in that code that you have, there are no design standards.
There's nothing there.
So can you go over what I want to just to think about, and something that we had talked about at the 2023, and then also I think that our ad hoc needs to look at too is, doesn't mean that we can't have some design standard around plaza, and, or a historic district, in that sense. So I'll let you go.
Okay.
I'm done. For now.
So, one of the things that, and I'll just say for the proposed ordinance, one thing that had been pointed out in the proposed ordinance is that for portable and temporary signs, there's a requirement for them to be professionally crafted, which under the proposed code means a permanent or temporary sign that is made to a high standard by a competent individual skilled in sign design, fabrication, and installation. So that's one of the things that could be either expanded on or included for permanent signs, but it's not, there's no design standards that are set in place. But that's the only thing that comes up in regard to some kind of design standard in the proposed ordinance. So to show you some of the existing sign standards, just to consider if any of these might jump out as being part of the proposed ordinance, is something that involves materials. So the current ordinance states that it should be geared to the architecture and materials of the building.
You're using should.
Well, this is your old.
This is the old.
This is the old one.
Yes.
Yeah, so it says existing standards. So these are, and these can be changed to however.
Or not at all.
Or not at all.
used at all.
Or not used at all. So yeah, so there's materials. There's something that stands out for Adobe Spanish style buildings for natural wood or painted or carved lettering, which has been stated to be the most appropriate sign material. For brick and stone buildings, a painted wood sign or exposed neon tubing on plastic. A permit for neon signs would be granted in exceptional cases. I was kind of surprised about the neon tubing on the brick and stone buildings. And yeah. For wooden or old west buildings, painted or natural wood signs or some alternate material might be made to resemble wood. And then it also states for color, the color of the sign should be harmonious and complementary to the colors of the building on or near which it is to be located. The letter style should be based on architectural style of the building. It goes into block letters for certain style buildings and then intricate lettering for others. And then logo symbols and pictures, which is symbols or anything they should be proper scale considering the overall size of the sign, and then only supplementary to the total identification for information of the sign. So these are kind of the standards that exist in the existing ordinance. They're like for color, it's very, it's qualitative. And
left to the discretion of staff, basically, or
Design review.
Ultimately, design review.
Ultimately, design review.
Yes.
Right.
So if you kind of took away these kind of standards and, just used the kind of mostly just size and.
Yeah, just the standards that exist in the sizing.
So again, I always like to think about what's the downside to doing that. I mean, someone could come in, unless you made a historical kind of criteria for the plaza.
Right.
Then someone could come in with a bright, fuchsia sign.
Made of plastic.
On a building. And I guess the question is that something that we feel is appropriate?
Right. It is up for debate in that sense.
To what extent do regulations like this fall under the state's requirements for objective language in a development code? These are not development code issues, right?
You're not preventing housing or development to occur by this.
Yes.
However, I always recommend that you can be subjective, but not this subject. Like the last slide it was a summary. These aren't exact, these are summaries, but.
But it does say some of these specific.
Yeah, some of these words, but especially pleasing.
Right. Well, that's my point.
Yeah, that's a little too so personally I avoid adjectives and things like that in my writings, and what I want in the ordinance as well is just, are we certain color? I'd rather go in the we don't want category rather than these are the things that we'll accept. More of we really don't want this in town or in our historic district. These are what we are saying are not allowed. That's a lot easier than trying to go with, maybe this, maybe that, if this, then that.
And I saw that written with regard to those signs that flail around. I mean, it was really clear what's not allowed. So, I mean, I like that idea of saying what is it we don't want.
And then, going with the plastic. So there's a difference between. You can see it. I mean, we can show you signs that we've approved and things that you guys can think about what that looks like. But there's a difference, obviously, between just a solid plastic with lettering that's in plastic of a different color. So that's just one solid versus, which I'm seeing more often, is the actual letters. So yeah, the plastic face, because we're having light come from. And a lot of those signs are also backlit. So they provide that shadow and that depth at night. But so we're seeing more of those type, but you also see pen letters. I was noticing, we were looking at it, the old code and this, and about, or this new code actually, about lighting, and we're gonna get to the illumination, but all the things you couldn't do, and I was like, yeah, but that actually that works, some of those examples, and so, again, it goes back to, what do we not want in town? It's a lot easier for us to regulate.
Well, and the other thing that's going to happen in the future, and I think it's going to happen pretty quickly, is that the digital revolution is going to produce a whole new generation of signage. From holographic signs, does the city of Sonoma want holographic signs? Does it want light projected holographic signs? And what, if any, are the limitations on that in terms of nighttime illumination? You've got the potential even for, and I don't think this is too far in the future, customized signs depending on who's walking by. Because the degree to which smartphone and other technologies are creating identifiable location identities for people who have now got a database of personal preferences, can in the future, and you can see this in some films that are out there, where people are walking down the street and the billboards are changing for each of the people who go by. I mean, this is coming, and I'm not saying that we can anticipate it perfectly, and I don't know if we can write an ordinance that takes that level of the future into consideration. I mean, it's part of my worry about planning in general, is that the rate of acceleration of technological change is happening so quickly, we can't get ahead of it very effectively. And I'll be interested to see what your thoughts on this are as we continue this discussion, because that's your business.
So in my experience, in regards to that, specifically for digital signage and things like that, you can't really regulate the copy or display, but you can regulate digital. You can say it cannot be electronically.
Which we do.
Displayed, in which that's part of the prohibited signage. Mm-hmm. So electronic displays is like the best way to go about, potential future things, if that's something of concern.
We've maintained majority of the prohibitions that currently exist in the code moving forward, except I think we opened it up to allowing more neon other than just a specific building type. And because, neon in historic corridors, like when I look at some of the old plaza pictures, we had gorgeous neon signs. We have a few neon signs right now. But we did not, any of other than we're not regulating the word open, but we are not allowing the movement signs at all still. None of the signs that change or anything that triggers visual flashing, blinking, so the big huge sign that you see in front of the fire department is actually a memorial on the backside. So that's why it's so big. And that's why design review approved it, was for the memorial purpose on the backside of their firefighters. The sign they wanted at the beginning was the same sign that they have in Boys that changes copy. And we said, no, we don't want that here. And they were gonna do the brand new LED bright things. And I was like, no, the code just doesn't allow that, but we can do, and so they came up with this other alternative, so.
One thing I
And to
didn't
get
see
back
is,
at you, they're now making us make numbers this big.
Exactly.
No, that was always required before. They changed the code for that before I got here.
one thing I didn't see in the code that you had written was a limitation on the lumens, like the brightness. So,
Right.
I mean, is that in the separate
area of the code, or?
I mean, we can add
I mean, I
that
think
as
that that would be an important thing to consider.
Yeah.
Especially with regard to nighttime sky and what we want.
In terms of lumens, I understand that, and I think with a lighting ordinance, it would probably be pretty direct to that as well.
But to
with,
signs, I mean.
Yeah, and so with
yeah.
signs, I'll show you the, so this is existing standards for illumination, but with the proposed, it's very specific to stating that it has to be steady, stationary, fully shielded, and directed solely onto the sign without causing any glare. So the light source must be arranged and shielded to confine all direct light rays onto the sign face and away from any streets and adjacent properties. So in terms of lumens, if the higher lumen, it's going to end up doing that, and that's not allowed as it is. So we can specify lumens, the amount of lumens, but we'd have to determine how many lumens it's going to take to reach that sign from however distance and when it would spill over. And when you make the regulations based on specifically stating that it can only be in this one location and affect this one spot, it's a way of like reducing the lumens without having to state specifically the calculations for those lumens.
So that it just falls back on them to figure that out.
Right, and for us to review it at the end of an installation to make sure that it is consistent with that standard.
And it goes to the internal as well, the backlit, right? Is how bright are we projecting that? So there's a difference between, a translucent, opaque, transparent, like there's different levels of plastic too in what that color, how much light comes through. So if you look at the Wells Fargo, we specifically said that you needed to have an opaque red so that the light was only coming through the letters was the goal, so that we could reduce the brightness of the red at night. So because we didn't want that sign to be super bright.
And how would you, in that instance with the new standards, how would you articulate that to them? I mean, does this give you that ability?
So we would need to work on how to word that a little bit more, if that's the direction that we want to go, and provide more specificity around that. But we were trying to get away from those types of signs in general. This was just a replacement, of an existing sign, and we were just changing the face. And so that's us working with them to change a face to not have a greater impact, because they had already, that original Wells Fargo sign had the same treatment. The maroonish color that Wells Fargo used to have was the same way. It was opaque. So no light was really coming through. When they changed to that bright red color, I was like, oh geez, are we gonna have like a bright red sign? So we worked with them on where.
So if we were to change the ordinance, you feel that if somebody was changing a current sign, that in kind, you would want it to maintain the same kind of feel that it had before, something more objective.
Yeah, we would be more objective, and then try to work with them to get it to be a little bit more compliant with what we have today without having to replace an entire sign.
And if you took out the other pages where you have all the existing materials, if you took that away, what kind of language can be put in there to allow the city to work with somebody?
Are you saying for the design standards?
Yeah, because I mean, if you take out materials, I mean, maybe it's one sentence that said it maybe something like should be geared toward the architecture materials of the building or something. I mean, I don't know what the language is, but if you take out all those other details, I would still think that you would need some kind of language so that you had an ability to influence what the signs would look like.
If the city's interested in having regulation over that, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think this is a key point, and I personally found the recommendations, if we can call them that, I mean, they use the word should, so it was a little beyond recommendations. It's not that far from should to shall, but in any event, I still think those were I'm wondering, for example, where a digital flat screen display in a window crosses the border and becomes a sign.
So I don't have I'd have to look at what the definition for sign is, but typically it's advertising a business. It's the advertising of the use of that property.
Okay, well, I'm not going to pick on any particular business, but in the real estate industry, for example, there is now the use of flat screen digital screens in the windows advertising properties.
I've seen that. Yeah.
And that's a commercial purpose and a commercial use. Is that signage or is that something else? And if it's something else, what is it?
So, there's two different ways we could treat it. We could treat it as signage, as far as it going into that signage code section. To me, that is going to be more about how much of your window can be used for display, right?
Well, right, because there are some real estate firms in town who don't have digital system in their windows. They just affix printed copies of property information in their windows and basically cover every window with it.
So there is a section in the proposed for temporary window signage, which would include something like that. Any type of posting or anything internally.
Okay, probably going to get some pretty heavy pushback from the real estate businesses in town about if you're going to start to limit how much they can promote the properties they have for sale in their windows. I mean, Teresa, what's your impression?
I think that putting up a flyer of a property that's for sale, plastered around the windows, I think it's really old school, and I can tell you Compass doesn't do it. We just, street, walk-in street, that kind of stuff, it's not how people, that's not how people purchase properties.
Okay, there's a place on Broadway, I think it's W, which has the flat screen TV displays of all their properties. And so that's falling into the category I'm talking about. Is that advertising and signage, or is it information? I mean, I don't know how we begin to make these distinctions.
Well, it's certainly a marketing tool.
Yeah.
I think it's advertising.
It's advertising the sale of something that they sell at that property.
So we just said that we were going to allow billboards. Obviously, people put up. The goal is, in this, as far as signage goes, is always going to be keeping it clean. The other goal is safety and making sure that windows that we can see through and what's going on. That's why we limit how much signage can go in a window, is to not cover the whole window and you're not seeing the action inside or outside. So we can apply that same thought process to our windows. We can be specific to commercial properties with commercial sized windows. We can be specific to public facing, anything that's facing the public street, not get into, what's going on, let's say back in the courts as an example, or in the Paseo, or we can. So we can create what we want at this point, but I would put that into looking at limiting how much space we are taking up on a window.
Okay, but that raises the specter of regulating merchandising. And I suspect that a lot of businesses would consider their window space to be their merchandising space, and they would just as soon fill the window with what it is they have to sell. And I think that would be the argument I would make as a real estate company, is that, we're just filling our windows with what we sell, no different than a company that sells shoes or dresses or anything else. They'll fill the window with what they have to sell. So then this raises the specter of the city regulating merchandising in the window of a business. And I'm not sure where we draw the line on that either.
There are a lot of shopping center owners that restrict signage, and there are tons of tenants that sign leases that say you won't put any signs in your window because the shopping center owners want to keep those things clean. I don't know that to me, the issue is going to be a new business coming into town being able to know with certainty what they can and cannot do.
Yeah.
And I'm almost kind of hearing we're going the other way, that it's going to become a little bit more amorphous than less certain. Am I getting the wrong impression here? Or
No, it'll be pretty specific. If you look through the window,
and not just to that point,
Yeah.
but just kind of overall. I'm a new business. I want to walk into town. I want to set up my business. I want to get my sign out, and I'm ready to roll. Are we setting them up to be able to look at the code and say, okay, here's what I can do, or here's the 3 things that I can't do, and otherwise I can do whatever I want?
Within these limits.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
I would say it's more readable with the proposed versus the existing. Personally.
Listening to this, I'm worried that it's kind of going the other way. It's like it's putting more
So, like,
discretion in the hands of us or you or.
The discretion will be the ordinance itself. I mean, that'll be, and we will just be reviewing the same thing they're reviewing.
But it's also going, and I understand your concern, it's also going that direction, as I've mentioned, because technology is pushing us in that direction. In other words, the opportunities and methodologies that businesses are going to be able to use in the future are going to be even more assertive, directive, and personalized than what it is now today. And I mean, this is just basically the world where we've entered. And so if there is an increasing level of complexity, which is what you're referring to, I think the city is going to have to confront that one way or another. It isn't that we're
Modifying
making it
this more often, perhaps, as a
Perhaps.
Or I think where Jennifer was going was, this is one way to do it. This is the way we have it now. But maybe we want to just say, these are the things you can't do.
Right.
And so we do need, I agree with you, we do need to give people guidance. And that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I would say this is what you can't do, and then part of that conversation that we want to have with the ad hoc and then bring that forward is more of, this is what we're looking for, and that's the question. Do we want to have this is what we're looking for just in the plaza? Because everything keeps coming back, right, to the plaza and maybe Broadway, just in this vicinity of what because we're really tight here. Yeah. It's really close. Everything is, you really don't have options for signs. And so we really just want to be, one of the things that we talked about with even the numbers is, what? They put up those plastic signs on this gorgeous stone building. Larry pointed it out to me 2 years ago. But they put this, they're hard to miss now, but she just noticed them last week.
Hard to miss.
But instead of that, we could have, could we have been more prescriptive and said, you know what, with the numbers, we need you to follow the thickness and the height rule, but we need you to do pens, pen numbers in that space and not apply a big plastic sheet against that lovely stone building. Like, that's where I'm going with, this is more prescriptive in certain areas, but otherwise.
Yeah, look, having a whole bunch of rules around the plaza, I think that makes a ton of sense. It's just kind of everything else.
Yeah. I mean, what I would, based on this conversation, I think some of the things that I would love to see are, getting back, Stephen, to what you said at the beginning, what would be great is to understand the intent of what we're trying to do. Like, there's no paragraph really around that. So start with that. And a lot of times, years later, we're coming in front of the planning commission with a code and saying, what was the intent of that code? And we have to rely on Larry to tell us, what happened 30 years ago. So coming up with this kind of vision or guidance of what we're trying to do with the signs for the city of Sonoma, I think would be great. I like the idea that because the plaza is like the jewel of the city, what do we want that plaza to look like? But also agree that, and outside of the plaza, have guidance for folks so that we are aligning with the mission, which is to make it clean, to minimize it, to be safe. And if there are certain things we absolutely don't want, to just really confine that. And it could be, flashing digital, whatever we decided. Finally, we did form an ad hoc. There were folks that were on the ad hoc, and I think it would be good to bring that to them to review it. Those are my comments.
I would, and going back to the ad hoc part, I would say reestablish an ad hoc.
I think that's a good idea.
Because I can't remember.
Okay. I didn't know if you had
So I'm gonna let him finish.
Yeah,
you're
I think
almost done.
the last thing was illumination. So, and we kind of got into it. The only other one is, aside from the external and internal, was multicolor LED signs, which would be allowed in commercial and mixed use zoning districts, except within the historic overlay.
I think you have to add another category, which is digital flat screen signage.
All right. Let's see. It is included in the total wall area, and then they can't exceed 2 square feet. So it's limited it's also limited to close or 10 p.m., whichever comes sooner.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What is a bandit sign? I didn't find the description or the definition.
A
But it's
bandit sign?
Bandit, like a one,
Was that on the proposed one?
it's of the band sign, BANDIT, a bandit sign. What is a bandit sign? I know what these guys are, and I don't just.
I think I remember seeing that, and I think I looked it up as well.
You know what a bandit sign is?
It's not in the definition.
I think we looked at it. We had to Google it.
I think I did have it.
Yeah, I Googled it too, and I didn't.
It did come up?
We found it. What was?
We did, but I can't remember what it came up with. Am I spelling that right? I can't see.
Yes.
It's like the political signs that you put in your grass.
That's a type 1 sign, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is that the same? Oh,
yeah,
right. Yeah.
like yard signs that you'd stick
A
in.
temporary.
I'm assuming they mean bandit because you can just run around and stick them. Kind of wherever. That's maybe why.
Like a bandit? That's a good assumption.
Maybe they can be easily.
Okay, well, thank you for, I didn't know what that was, and I.
Yeah.
We already, this is kind of adjacent to it, but do we already regulate promotion via sound?
Not from what I know.
Not that I know.
But noise generating devices can be included as a prohibited signage. I don't know if it was already in there.
Well, I think it's something to look at.
Yeah.
There's technologies out there today which include what I refer to as tightly focused sound that is so tightly focused that as you walk into the field of the sound, which could be as little as 3 or 4 feet wide, you hear it, and then as you walk past the sound corridor, you don't hear it. Mm-hmm. And this technology already exists. And so I'm just wondering whether that's something that
my last jurisdiction prohibited noise generating devices when we updated our sign ordinance.
Yeah. And what did they call them?
Noise generating devices.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that should be included.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember, but I know I had this problem in another jurisdiction too, is the signs that go on vehicles and people just park them.
Yeah.
Right. Mobile
the street.
signage.
Yeah.
It's
Or-
used as billboards almost.
I thought that I saw something in the.
There it is.
I think we had something on mobile,
Yeah, it is.
like you can't drive
Yeah.
billboards through town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we said, right?
Yeah, and I looked that up with the state, and local municipalities do have the authority to regulate mobile signage like that. So it is something that we are eligible to regulate.
Is it time, would it be all right if I opened it up for public comment at this time?
Sure.
Would you like to make a comment? We would love to hear comments.
not? Yes.
We would love to hear your comments.
Hi, I'm Robert Sanders. I own a sign company. And I was here about a year or two ago, and we were going to put me on a committee to work on this. And so I congratulate you for getting this started. This is awesome. And so I'm an ex-city planner, and I've designed a lot of signs around here. And I like what you're saying about the quality of our plaza. I got sucked into being on the Sonoma League of Historic Preservation in January, so I'm sensitive to that. But I'm also on Ron Wellender's committee to make planning and building expedient and getting us through. And we just had a meeting, and this was coming up. So I just had a day to look at it, but my favorite section is the exemption of signs that you made a nice list that I don't have to come in for because we're just exchanging a new guy. That makes a lot of sense. And then administratively. But, you know, through the years, I've done a lot of sign programs and a lot of projects, but I think design review has really come through protecting us through these years. I mean, I see that businesses are struggling, but each business has a little personality, and so you got to give them enough. You got to give the architect or designers enough freedom to do some great signage, and then kind of regulate the problems, because there's always some people that try to push it, and I've been there. Tried never to represent them, actually, but I think this is a great start. And I do have a little list of things that, you know, we have 50 freestanding signs that are probably 2 or 3 feet from the property line, and this is saying 5 feet, so we need to iron out some of that. Or the horrible thing was how the monument sign had this penalty thing where it does 75% of one side. Most cities just say you get a monument sign and you don't count the other side, and you get 30 square feet, and it's very clear and simple. So you're really on the right track with this. So again, any way I can help or be on a committee or give advice, I'm here.
Is
Yes.
happening.
We would definitely.
So congratulations on getting this started. It's great. So.
Is it possible to, sounds like he's open to being on the ad hoc.
Yeah, that'll be for you guys to determine.
I mean, we don't have the full cast of characters here from the commission. I don't know if anyone here would want to volunteer to be on the ad hoc.
Or volunteer the ones that aren't here.
Yes.
I don't know that they. I can't remember. Wasn't it Sheila wanted it, and then
Yeah, I don't
you?
remember. I don't think I wanted signs.
Stephen, you have passion for signs.
I would volunteer because I don't know enough to not volunteer.
But Sheila did. I remember
she
Sheila
did.
did once.
And I talked to her about that today.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I've been identified for a couple other ad hocs that have not assembled yet.
Yeah, I'm starting it. I'm starting.
Okay, yeah, so, but I don't recall that sign was a passion of mine.
Well,
And Isabel, you're more than welcome to join any ad hoc as well.
Doesn't it sound exciting?
It's very intriguing.
But you'll ask.
Now, you, are you a senior?
No, I'm going to be a junior.
Oh, great, so we've got you
Yeah,
we've got you for a while.
Ah.
I hope you're enjoying it.
I am.
All right, well, we sound like we have at least 3 folks.
Yeah, you only need, technically, you could have just one. So
Yeah, I
that's
think
2 is fine. And then we would do and just an outside expert.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Well, it's a very interesting topic.
Yeah.
And over the years, and I was glad to hear you say you think it's been successfully administered generally, and I would say that's true. And because I do think the intent has always been, even though it may not have been as clearly stated as it could have been, the intent has always been embodied in the judgmental process, which is to enhance the unique character of us as a community, not to begin looking like every town USA, and to encourage creativity and discourage uniformity and corporate identity as the predominant impression that people get of the city. And I think it has worked out well in general.
Well, lastly, all I had was potentially going over the signage, or the sizing. If that's something you would like to look over, but I'm sure you've already looked at the ordinance. The other thing, in regard to what you're talking about, creativity, I have seen also there's, creative sign permits that I've seen as like an option of a type of administrative permit regarding specific materials being used or specific designs that might be outlandish from your typical signage. So use of maybe like metal materials that kind of makes the form of a bird, or someone who has the artistic talent to go about that, that goes beyond the typical sizing allowances or things like that.
Well,
so that's another thing about character in terms of, I know there's a art in terms of the city and their the interest in art. That might be something that also.
Well, this was a subject that came up, and I was on the city council at the time, when the Black Bear Diner came up and wanted to install wooden carved bears on their property as part of their promotional plan. I mean, their identity. And their argument was, at least someone made the argument, oh, these aren't signs, these are sculptures. And this is just public art. And there was this whole discussion back and forth about it. And then the question came up, I will admit I raised it, is that if I owned a food chain called Hippo and I wanted to put a pink hippopotamus out on the lawn, would that also be just considered sculptural art, or would that be actually a branded promotion? And it is a very interesting discussion, and it leads into all kinds of provocative areas. And I think that's healthy, and I think it's healthy to have those discussions. They're kind of difficult because we're talking about a very subjective area here, which has to do with taste and aesthetics, and what's art and what's not. I mean, you mentioned a sign made out of metal of a bird. Well, I don't know. You've got the chicken up at Boys Hot Springs at the market. You got a big chicken now. Yeah. I mean, is that a sign? Is that a promotional commercial effort, or is it, a piece of artwork? That gets blurry. Yeah. And but I think these are good things to explore.
What are the regulations about the repair of signs? I recall the Jack in the Box illuminated sign was for a couple of years broken. Do you remember this? It was recently fixed, but do we have any
We don't have anything for, at least not that I saw in the proposed, for requiring repair and maintenance or active repair and maintenance to maintain, like a constructed sign, or however you'd put it, but we do allow for the repair and maintenance as an exemption. So,
it's an eyesore. I mean,
we started putting it in the code enforcement. Not code enforcement, in the conditions of approval of the sign. So we can duplicate that into a code.
There's also a section in our current code that the owners of the property have to maintain.
Yeah,
the signage.
It's in sign maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, and then that's a code enforcement action.
Okay.
When you have signs that are non-conforming, you can repair and maintain. When you go to, let's say that they have a pole sign and it's above our height requirements, and they want to go and replace the whole pole sign, we're going to make them comply. If they're just replacing face, then we're just replacing face, because the structural elements are not changing. Does that make sense?
Okay. Sure does.
But other than that, I don't have anything else to add, unless we want to dig deeper into what's proposed. But sounds like we have a pretty good path forward and idea of an ad hoc that might form to help kind of dig into some of those deeper topics, and then can formulate something that's going to be able to be brought back and discussed further.
Yeah, wonderful.
With the goal of finishing this year.
Yeah.
Hey.
Great. Any other comments? I think we blended the questions and comments, and thank you for the public comments. Thank you for volunteering. So, all right, well, I'll close this topic then. Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah, of course.
All right, making our way. Director comments and announcements?
Just two main comments. One, tomorrow city council and the budget is the main item of the night. That is what we're focused on tomorrow night. And then on the 23rd, we'll have our next general plan task force meeting, finishing up talking about the local economy element and then starting into the noise element. So that's in this room at 5:30 on the 23rd. So those are my two things.
Okay. Any commissioner reports or comments? I have one question, but anyone else?
No.
Commissioner Barnett?
I just want to say with regard to the local economy element, I sent a letter and I think I included you on the list. I sent it to the city council and planning department, whatever. I was very disappointed with the local economy, the draft of the local economy element, which to me read like it was written in 1995. There was no mention or acknowledgement of the technological changes and the work environment changes taking place in America, both in terms of remote working, in terms of retail, the impact of the internet on retail sales. I mean, it still had the old 1995 language about encouraging businesses to come to Sonoma that will provide high-paying jobs. I mean, really, let's get real about where we are in this economy today. And I thought that this local economy element felt like a cut and paste job from a long time ago. So I said that in my letter to the council, and I can send you a copy tomorrow if you'd like. The other part of it that bothered me was that in the implementation of achieving its goals, the primary focus was to work with the Chamber of Commerce and the Visitors Bureau, as if they're the thought leaders on how to develop and sustain a viable local economy. They can barely maintain the viable economy of their own organizations.
I would love a copy of your letter. I'd love to read it. If you
Okay,
share
I
with
didn't
me.
go into great detail, but I couldn't believe that there was a local economy element written with no acknowledgement of remote working, the reality of, and there's another thing in there about encouraging developers to, I can't remember the exact language now, but it was something about new developments should include retail spaces available for retail purposes. Well, but talk to Ryan Snow and he'll tell you about what's going on in the retail sector. Retail is dying. That a local economy element that's looking 20 years into the future is talking about increasing retail is crazy. There should have been discussion in there about the reality of what commercial uses are actually going to be successful. And the commercial uses, based on the research I've done, that are going to be successful in the future are commercial uses where people gather. That would be places where teens can find a place. I mean, my 17-year-old granddaughter who's just about to get her license, and God forbid already has a car, said that, she and her friends can't find a place to eat at midnight. And they're just desperate for it. But and she told me about something one day, I can't remember, about rage rooms. You know about rage rooms?
I've heard of it, but I've never been.
Yeah, rage rooms. Now, I'm not saying the city of Sonoma ought to have a rage room. These are rooms where you go in and you rent time and space to destroy stuff.
Oh, God.
Which gets out a certain kind of energy, better than destroying stuff in a rage room designed to wreck a piece of furniture than to spray graffiti and.
That could be a new retail space, the Rage Room.
Well, exactly. And so to have the economy element not include any references to public gathering spaces, which could be sporting venues and other kinds of things where people come together, it just felt antiquated to me. So I'm giving you that feedback, and I'll send you the letter tomorrow.
So just as a reminder too, is that we have the general plan ad hoc committee. So when you send stuff to me in the comments, those are the things that I will work with the planning commission. So each commission's gonna have their own take on things too. And so there are things that we talked about at the task force meeting too, that, they felt like things were missing. We talked about, the co-working spaces, like we have our first one. So, kind of seeing how that works. Because we had talked about it as a task force actually when we started, like, gosh, that would be one use that we would like to see very easy to come in. And now they have one, and the person that was interested in it is using it. So like just different things like that we talked about. And adding some more information. So that's where I'm going to take in comments from the different groups and individuals and make it more robust and add to it. That's why we provide that initial draft, get feedback, but that feedback, what we want to do is, where is it lacking? Where do we need to bump in more information? I want to put more around cultural tourism, heritage tourism. So just different things like that. Yeah. So
you're familiar with SoCo work over in Roner Park?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's a remarkable space, and they just recently added a beer purveyor, and there's housing nearby, and there's a school nearby, and it's this whole little hub of activity. The parking lot is constantly full, and the shared working space, they probably have a suite of, 30 or 40 offices that individuals rent, and then they have a common reception space. I mean, these are the things we should be developing. To talk about developing retail and high-paying jobs is, I'm sorry, it's over. And we're gonna have to look for revenues somewhere else.
Yep, and those were part of the conversations that the task force brought up too. So
good.
You're not independent on that. There are lots of things. And so that's where I was, it's just, as we go through these elements, again, that's why I wanted to put out these initial drafts. I wouldn't call them the drafts by which you guys are going to make recommendations to council. This is our first draft, our first touch. I plan on having another round. I just want to get everybody's initial feedback, kind of filter through, figure out what goes into an actual general plan, because some things, have a higher level of specificity that don't go there. Can go on this, I would call it my secondary list of ideas, but we can move that forward. So it's not your first bite at the apple by any means around that. So, but making sure that I am copied on any comments.
Yeah, I don't know why you didn't get it.
I might
sent some in too, but
I don't, and so it's like, did it go to public comment?
Yeah,
and
I
it just
sent
didn't
it
come
to
down
public
to me, and
comments,
and that's where I might have gotten like 100 and something emails that day, and I just lost it. I could always look.
I have one other comment question regarding the public comments this earlier around the mobile home closure and conversion and the assembly bill. Jennifer, what do you see as kind of the next steps for that? Because it was in the housing element item number 11. So
it's one of many laws to implement that HCD really said, oh, I need you to do this. And so if that is, requested from the commission, then my next step would be to bring in probably an attorney, one of our city attorneys, to actually talk about what that bill is saying and what we can and can't do around it and what that looks like, and then have them write that ordinance.
And how do we go about developing the consensus to give you that direction
Yeah.
if
You
we
can-
don't agendize it?
So it's just a directive, so like I can be directed from you guys
I
to
would like to direct
agendize.
you to.
To agendize.
Put it on hold.
The chair can tell me to agendize.
Please.
And so we can agendize it. I'd have to talk to the attorney again of when they're available and which attorney. I'm going to assume it's probably going to be Alex, so it'll be a Zoom call. My hopes is if it's not too robust, is probably tack on maybe a couple other bills that we need to better understand to write ordinances around. Because there's intent when you read these bills. You got this lovely intent, and then when you actually get into the meat, you're like, wait, what does it say? So, I haven't really looked closely at this one, but I know that I have that feeling about other housing ones when they start getting into very specific things of you can do this, but
My understanding from the group is that they did have an attorney, and that attorney wrote language for Watsonville. And there may be portions of that may be adoptable in the city. So there may be something to start working with.
yeah,
It's already been established.
and that would be up to our
Yeah.
attorney to decide what that looks like.
Yeah, but 9 to 10% of the population living in the mobile home parks, that's a real number, relative to anything.
Oh, yeah. No,
In one fell swoop, you can address 10% of your population. That's a real
Yeah, we have a lot.
thing to focus on.
So we control, like they were saying, we don't control every single mobile home park, but the ones that we do have, we control their, the rent of the land, the rent of the space. That's what we control.
Yeah, but the conversion and closure is a different
Yes.
animal.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, thank you. Any other comments? Well, item 8, would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'm so moved. Might as well.
Close it out for us.
I think you did all